Om, Om. There we go. All right. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back. And where are you? There. Nice to have you here for class. Also welcome to all of our students watching online. Make sure this is all working fine. Looks okay. So we continue today our study of chapter 11, the very dramatic chapter in which Sri Krishna reveals his Vishvarupa, his cosmic form. And at this point in the chapter, Arjuna has already requested Sri Krishna to reveal his cosmic form. Sri Krishna has blessed Arjuna with Divya Drishti, the ability to see that divine form. And then Sri Krishna has revealed himself. First, Sanjaya describes Sri Krishna's revelation, and now we're in a series of verses where Arjuna is describing what he sees and hears and feels there on the battlefield, and it's absolutely overwhelming. I'll introduce that later. We'll begin with some recitation, beginning with verse 28. Recall that we're in the longer meter, the very dramatic long meter. We'll see that in much of the chapter. And as I'm chanting, be sure to read the translation so you know what's being said, and then repeat after me. Yatha nadinam bahavom bhavegaha Yatha nadinam bahavom bhuvegaha samudrameva bhimukhadраvanti samudrameva bhimukhadраvanti Tata tavami naralokavira Tata tavami naralokavira Vishanti vaktranyabhivijwalanti Vishanti vaktranyabhivijwalanti Yatha pradiptam jwalanam patanga Yatha pradiptam jwalanam patanga Vishanti nashaya samriddha vegaha Vishanti nashaya samriddha vegaha Tathaiva nashaya vishanti lokas Tathaiva nashaya vishanti lokas Tavapi vaktrani samriddha vegaha Tavapi vaktrani samriddha vegaha Le lihya segra samana samanta Le lisya segra samana Lokan samagran vadanarjwaladbihi Lokan samagran vadanarjwaladbihi Tejo bhira purya jagat samagram Tejo bhira purya jagat samagram Bhasastavogra pratapanti Vishnu Bhasastavogra pratapanti Vishnu Akyahi me ko bhavanugra rupo Akyahi me ko bhavanugrarupo namostute devavara prasida namostute devavara prasida Vijñātumiccāmi bhavantamadhyam Vijñātumiccāmi bhavantamadhyam Nahi prajanami tava pravrittam Nahi prajanami tava pravrittam Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kalosmi lokakshaya krit pravriddho Kalosmi lokakshaya krit pravriddho Lokan samahartamiha pravrittaha Lokan samahartamiha pravrittaha Ratepi tvam nabhavishyanti sarve Ratepi tvam nabhavishyanti sarve Ye vastitha pratyanikeshu yodhaha Ye vastitha pratyanikeshu yodhaha Tasmat tvamuttishta yasholabhasva Tasmat tvamuttishta yasholabhasva Jitva Trum bhungshva rajyam samriddham Jitva shatrum bhungshva rajyam samriddham Mayaivaite nehita purvameva Mayaivaite nehita purvameva Nimitra matram bhava savyasachan Nimitra matram bhava savyasachan. Pretty dramatic. Nice. And it's also fun for me because usually I'm engaged in teaching all these fairly heavy teachings of Advaita Vedanta, and here I have a chance to share with you this wonderful story. And since it's mostly story, we'll continue to go through the verses fairly quickly. We'll slow down where there's some symbolism, and we're going to see some symbolism at the beginning of today's class, because where we left off in Arjuna's narration, Arjuna is watching all these great warriors gathered on the battlefield are all being sucked in, so to speak, to the many mouths of Sri Krishna. Each mouth has all these terrible teeth, he describes, and blazing with fire. And here we have to reflect on the symbolism of those blazing mouths. What Arjuna is witnessing, he doesn't understand yet. In fact, Sri Krishna is going to explain later. What Arjuna is watching, though he doesn't understand it yet, he is watching a sneak preview, so to speak, of what's going to happen there on the battlefield, which means he's looking into the future. He is seeing these warriors drawn into Sri Krishna's mouths. He's seeing them die on the battlefield. And the fact of the matter is, most of those warriors gathered on the battlefield will, in fact, perish in battle. So Arjuna is getting this so-called sneak preview. He's seeing what is about to happen, watching these warriors drawn into Sri Krishna's blazing mouths. And to describe that, Arjuna uses two very beautiful metaphors to describe that terrible scene. Sometimes in the prior verse, what we saw is a very literal explanation, where Arjuna is describing graphically the teeth and the fire and the people whose heads are stuck in between Sri Krishna's teeth. So after that graphic description, now he gives in two verses, two metaphoric descriptions. Very beautiful metaphors that also have some symbolic meaning. We'll see that meaning right now. We'll pick up the thread with verse 28. Yata nadinam bahavombuvegaha Yata nadinam bahavombuvegaha samudramevabhimukhadravanti samudramevabhimukhadravanti Tata tavami naraloka virha Yatha tavami naraloka virha Vishanti vaktranya bivijwalanti Vishanti vaktranya bivijwalanti. Good. So Yatha in the first line and tata in the third line. Very typical Sanskrit grammar, introducing the drishtanta and the darshtanta. Drishtanta is a metaphor. Darshtanta is what is represented by the metaphor. So first we get the drishtanta, the metaphor. Yata, just like, bahavaha, many, ambuvegaha. Vega means current. Ambuvegaha, many currents of water. What kind of currents? Nadinam, of the rivers. So the currents of many rivers, just like those currents, second line and dravanti, they run, they flow, samudrameva, towards the sea. Abhimukhaha, those rivers, excuse me. Those rivers are all directed towards the sea, and those rivers empty into the sea. The metaphoric meaning is quite clear. What happens to the river after it empties into the sea? River is gone. Water is there. But the identity of the river is destroyed when it enters the vast ocean. So just like the identity of the rivers gets destroyed when they enter the ocean, what happens to our identities as individual beings at the time of death? That's the metaphor. Notice water continues to exist after the rivers empty into the ocean. In the same way, your true nature, the essence of who you are, Satchidananda Atma, continues to exist after death. But individual identity is destroyed at death, which is what Arjuna describes here. Tata, in the same way, just like those rivers lose their individual identity when they enter the ocean, tata, in the same way. Ami naraloka viraha, these great warriors of the world gathered on the battlefield on both sides. Arjuna described before that the warriors entering the mouths of Sri Krishna were not only the Kauravas, they were his own warriors as well. So warriors from both sides of the battlefield, Loka, Naraloka Viraha, these greatest warriors of the world. What about them? Vishanti. They enter what? That word tava in the first line, tata tava. They enter tava vaktrani. We have to connect those disconnected words. They enter your mouths. What kind of mouths? Abhidvijwalanti, your blazing mouths, those warriors enter. So Arjuna is seeing physically before his eyes, Arjuna is witnessing these warriors entering the mouths and dying. And Arjuna uses this poetic language. Those great warriors lose their individuality at the time of death, just like these rivers lose their individuality when they meet the sea. Now, Arjuna has one more metaphor to describe what's happening here, and a little more involved metaphor. Let's see it. Yatha pradiptam jwalanam patanga, yatha pradiptam jwalanam patanga, vishanti nashaya samruddha vegaha, vishanti nashaya samruddha vegaha, tathaiva nashaya vishanti lokas, tathaiva nashaya vishanti lokas, tavapi vaktrani samruddha vegaha, tavapi vaktrani samruddha vegaha. Again, yatha in the first line and tatha eva in the third line. So the metaphor, drishtanta, and the darshtanta. Tatha, yatha, just as patangaha. Patanga here means like a moth or butterfly, a winged insect. Call it a moth. And what about those moths? Moths are drawn to fire. You know that? Pradiptam jwalanam. Jwalanam, fire, which is pradiptam, which is kindled. Moths are drawn to that fire. Those moths vishanti, enter that blazing fire. And those moths being samruddha vegaha, they are excited to enter that fire. You see the moths kind of circle around the fire excitedly. They're not kind of casually cruising. They're excited by the heat and brilliance of the fire. And with that excitement, they vishanti, they enter the fire, nashaya, resulting in their deaths. They are destroyed in that fire. What a metaphor. So obviously what's still being described here by Arjuna, metaphorically, is the death of all those warriors on the battlefield. What drew them to the battlefield is being explained here in this metaphorically. So notice the irony, and irony is the correct word, because the moths are very attracted to the brilliance and warmth of fire, but that attraction is ultimately deadly. They call it fatal attraction. It sounds like a movie, I suppose. Is it? So this is the fatal attraction. Usually it's in a romantic sense. Here there's nothing romantic about it. So these moths are drawn into the fire. You get the metaphor, right? People are subject to fatal attraction, which is something looks very alluring out there. And people choose to pursue that which is alluring, even when it's adharmic, even when it's wrong. And when you pursue something that's attractive, and it happens to be the wrong thing, what is the consequence? We suffer the consequences of our adharmic deeds. We suffer some of the consequences immediately, here and now, and in this lifetime. We suffer the consequences also in later lifetimes by incurring this papa karma, which will affect us later. The fact is how alluring it is, how ironic, that's the word we're focusing on, how ironic it is that we're attracted to something, but that attraction is supposed to bring you something wonderful, delightful. But this so-called fatal attraction doesn't bring you something delightful. It brings you suffering, ultimately. When you commit acts of adharma in the pursuit of pleasure, that's basically what it comes down to. In the pursuit of pleasure, if you pursue pleasure through adharmic means, you may get a little pleasure here and there, but ultimately you get suffering here in this life and perhaps in later lives. And every person is subject to this. And the further irony is we should know better. In fact, in Bhartrahari, the author of the famous Vairagya Shatakam, 100 verses on Vairagya, on dispassion, he makes a very sarcastic comment, and that is, moths are drawn into fire. Well, they're insects, but we should know better. But when we pursue pleasure, even when it's contrary to Dharma, we know that the long-term consequence will be suffering. We know that. We're smarter than moths, I hope. And yet, it happens anyway, in spite of our intelligence. Moths can't help it because they're moths. We should know better. But in spite of the fact that we are intelligent, sometimes our intelligence is overcome by raga and dvesha. We've had this discussion many times here. It's raga and dvesha overpower your rational thinking process and lead you to take actions and make decisions that you know are wrong. We've described raga dvesha as inner compulsions. They compel you to chase after things that you know are wrong. They compel you to run away from things that you're supposed to do. So these compulsions bring us so much suffering. Moths are helpless. And so too, when we are overcome by raga and dvesha, we're also helpless. In that moment, when you're overcome by raga dvesha, which is why Sri Krishna says so strongly, I think back in chapter 3 and 4, that raga and dvesha are your enemies. Keep them away. So, the metaphor that Arjuna uses is just as these moths are helplessly drawn in to the fire. And not just helplessly, they're excited. They want to go into that fire. Samruddha vegaha. Literally, not literally, but their vega, their speed is samvruddha, increased. So it has a sense of excitement. Those moths are excited to enter the fire, tata eva, in the same way. Lokaha, in the end of the third line, these people, Arjuna's probably pointing out onto the battlefield, all these warriors gathered on the battlefield, lokaha, all of them, vishanti, all of them enter, tava api vaktrani, they enter tava, your vaktrani, your mouths, your blazing mouths, and nashaya, resulting in their deaths. And just like the moths are samruddha vegaha, they're excited to enter, here Arjuna observes that even these warriors are samruddha vegaha. They're excited to enter. One who sees something alluring, we're back to our fatal attraction. When you see something alluring, there's that excitement. In fact, sometimes the fact that it is adharmic for some people adds to the excitement. What kind of perverse thinking is that? But it happens, right? What do they call it? Illicit pleasures. How's that? So for some people, the fact that it's illicit makes it even more appealing. That's delusion, right? That's the power of raga dvesha. So with that excitement, these warriors, and now back to the warriors on a battlefield, these warriors are all pumped up with adrenaline. They're eager to fight in a battle that will result in their deaths. And that then represents, not just for the warriors, that represents this problem of life. When someone who is overcome by raga and dvesha gets excited when they see some illicit pleasure, and they commit acts of adharma to pursue that illicit pleasure, and what is the consequence? Arjuna says twice, nashaya. It results in your destruction. It results in suffering. Okay. Now, after these two verses of metaphor, Arjuna is back to his graphic description. Oops, where am I? There we go. So he's back to describing very vividly what he sees. Lelihya segra samana samantal, lelihya segra samana samantal, lokan samagran vadanarjwaladbihi, lokan samagran vadanarjwaladbihi, tejo bhira purya jagat samagram, tejo bhira purya samagram, bhasastavogra pratapanti vishnu, bhasastavogra pratapanti vishnu. So Arjuna is describing Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna who is grasamanaha. For our Sanskrit students, nice present participle, eating. Chewing, eating or chewing, and lelihyase is a verb. You lick. Again and again. You continue, he's addressing Krishna, and he says that you are eating and you are licking. You're licking and eating samantat, those who have come nearby, those lokan, those people, those warriors, samagran, all of those warriors who are entering your mouths. So you eat them and you lick them, vadanaihi, with your mouths, which are jwaladbihi, which are blazing. With your blazing mouths, you chew and consume all of those mighty warriors entering your blazing mouths. Back to this very graphic description. Tejo bihi apurya, apurya, filling, jagat samagram, filling the entire world with your tejas. Now tejas can mean light, but here we're talking about those blazing mouths, blazing with fire. So fire not only emits light, it emits heat. And if you come too close to a blazing fire, you feel that heat. So here, tapas means that heat. So you fill the entire world. Arjuna addresses Krishna, your tejo bihi, with your heat of apurya. The entire jagat samagram, the entire world is apurya, filled with your heat. Bhasas tava ugraha. Tava, your. Bhasas. Ugraha bhasas. Your fierce, and bhasas here has to be understood as rays. Your rays of, your terrible rays, like in sun ray, like a ray of light, a beam of light. So if you can think of these fires as burning so bright that they emit rays of light, rays of heat is the sense here. So the many mouths with blazing fires emit ugraha, terrible bhasas, terrible rays of heat, which pratapanti, which burn, you can take the prior line, jagat samagram, which burn the entire world. It sets afire the entire world. He's trying to describe very intense fire. So sometimes fire is not very intense. This is an incredibly intense fire. Vishnu, O Vishnu, he addresses Sri Krishna. And then Arjuna concludes his narration of what he sees. And he concludes with a question. We've said before in our last class that at some point awe crosses a line. It starts out as being awesome, as we said before. After it crosses the line, it becomes awful. Too much awe is frightening. So this has happened for Arjuna. What was at first awesome is now overwhelming. It's awful. And Arjuna is overwhelmed, and he doesn't understand. Arjuna wants to understand. So he asks Sri Krishna, Akyahi me ko bhavanugra rupo, Akyahi me ko bhavanugra rupo, Namostu te deva vara prasida, Namostu te deva vara prasida, Vijñātumiccāmi bhavantamadhyam, Vijñātumiccāmi bhavantamadhyam, Nahi prajanami tava pravrittam, Nahi prajanami tava pravrittam. Akyahi me, tell me. Me unto me, akyahi, tell me. Tell me what? Tell me, kaha bhavan, who are you? Ugra rupaha, with this terrible form, with this frightening form. Who are you with this terrifying form? Namostute, namaha astute, salutations unto you. Te, devavara, O best of the gods, prasida, have mercy. So Arjuna is begging for some relief from this terrible vision. Of course, that will come much more later. But Arjuna is begging for, he must feel threatened with those blazing fires. If you come too close to a blazing fire, it's frightening. You fear being burnt by that fire. Arjuna must feel fearful with all these blazing mouths. Prasida, have mercy, be pleased, don't hurt me. But further, Vijñātum iccāmi. Iccāmi, I want, Vijñātum, to know, I want to understand, Bhavantam, you. Adyam, in this foremost form. Foremost means greatest form, terrible form. I want to understand you in this form. And in particular, Arjuna says, Na prajanami, I don't understand tava pravrittim, what you're engaged in. Tava, your pravritti, your engagement, your activity. Activity would be a simpler explanation here. I don't understand what you're doing. And what Sri Krishna is doing, of course, is drawing all these warriors into his blazing mouths and consuming them, killing them. Arjuna doesn't understand. Why are you doing this? Again, Arjuna doesn't understand yet that he's getting the sneak preview. Arjuna's looking into the future. Seriously, he's looking into the future. He's getting that glimpse. Remember, he was given Divya Drishti. With that Divya Drishti, Arjuna literally sees the future in a symbolic way, not in a literal way. In a symbolic way, Arjuna sees the future. He sees all of these great warriors meeting their deaths. And with Arjuna's question, now Sri Krishna replies. And remember, the Sri Krishna who is replying now is not Arjuna's charioteer. now Vishwarupa. Sri Krishna, in his cosmic form, Sri Krishna replies, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Kalosmi Lokakshaya Krit Pravriddho, Kalosmi Lokakshaya Krit Pravriddho, Lokan Samahartamiha Pravrittaha, Lokan Samahartamiha Pravrittaha, Ritepi Tvam Nabhavishyanti Sarve, Ritepi Tvam Nabhavishyanti Sarve, Ye Vastita Pratyanikeshu Yodhaha, Ye Vastita Pratyanikeshu Yodhaha. So Shri Krishna says it in two words. Kalaha asmi. I am time. So he's manifesting as time, time which is loka kshaya krit, time which is kshaya krit, which brings destruction to loka, all the worlds, all people, and Sri Krishna is pravriddha. He is engaged. He is engaged in the act of bringing about the end of life that every person meets due to the passage of time. That's what he says. He says, I am kalaha, time. He says, I am loka kshaya krit. I am time in the sense of mrityu, death. I am time in the form of death, which brings the end to life. It brings the end to life when your karmas are exhausted, right? That's not a bad thing. That's a normal thing. Now it happens that all those warriors on the battlefield, there's a little bit about the doctrine of karma here, it is important to understand. It happens that all the warriors on that battlefield are at the end of their lives karmically. That is, their karmas are going to be exhausted. The remaining karmas are going to be exhausted during the battle. And when their karmas are exhausted, they will die on that battlefield. No one knows it except for Krishna. This just, yeah, that's fine. Arjuna doesn't know that, although he was getting the sneak preview, which he didn't quite understand. The warriors themselves don't know that they're going to reach their end on the battlefield. Sri Krishna knows. He knows that they are karmically destined to die on that battlefield. And he says, I am pravriddha, I am gauged, and pravrittaha, better. I am pravritta, end of the second line. I am engaged in an activity, samahartum, to destroy lokan, all these people, all these warriors on the battlefield. I am time, the destroyer of worlds. I am death. I am death in the form of the end of life, which is karmically determined. And I'm kind of stressing this because Sri Krishna here is Ishvara, and we must remember, this is a very common confusion, that Ishvara does not have an individual will like you and I. And this is a very common misunderstanding of Ishvara. We have a human kind of will. We choose what we're going to do. You chose to come here for class. So that is an act of will. It would be absolutely wrong to say that Sri Krishna has decided to kill all those warriors on the battlefield. To say that Sri Krishna has decided to kill them is to superimpose a human kind of will on the God of the cosmos. Sri Krishna is not like, you get up in the morning and decide what you're going to do. Sri Krishna, as Ishvara, doesn't first get out of bed. How silly is that? You get the point. It's silly to think of Ishvara in human terms. Not silly is maybe not, it's incorrect. It's childish, in fact, to think of Ishvara as simply another human being. So with that in mind, it would be incorrect to assume that Sri Krishna has somehow taken a decision, I'm going to destroy all these warriors. Not at all. Sri Krishna knows that it is the karma of all of these warriors to die on that battlefield. It's an already existent fact that all these warriors will exhaust their karmas in the course of that battle and perish on the battlefield. Sri Krishna doesn't cause it, he knows it. He knows it will happen. He understands the inevitability. He calls himself Lokakshayakrit. He calls himself Kala, time, in the sense that he is the intelligence of the cosmos. So if you say that, and the way to understand it is this, the law of karma is whose law? An interesting way of putting it, right? Every law has an author. So there's a speed limit on the road in front of the ashram. And I've mentioned to you before, if you're passing the ashram in the middle of the week, be careful because the local police cars have a way of parking in our parking lot with radar. And they watch people going too fast on this road, and they give a lot of tickets here, so be careful. Anyway, the point is that the speed limit on the road is a law. That law has an author. Every law has an author. The law of karma has an author. Sri Krishna as Ishvara, as the God of the cosmos, is the author. What we can say then is that the law of karma is part of the intelligent order of the universe. Intelligent order of the universe means that the planets continue to circle the sun. Because of that intelligence of the universe, the source of the intelligence of the universe, the source of the intelligent order of the universe is Ishvara. An intelligent order includes laws of cause and effect. Intelligent order includes the laws of karma. So Sri Krishna is not making a choice. He's going to die, he's going to die, he's going to die. But rather, Sri Krishna knows that according to the laws of karma, all of these warriors are going to die. And he says that in the second half. He says, Sarve na bhavishyanti. Sarve, them. Na bhavishyanti. They will not survive. They will not continue to exist. Who are they? Yea, those who, in the last line, yea, those who are avastitaha, standing, assembled, those yodhaha, those warriors who are standing here assembled, prati anikeshu. Anika is an unusual word for army. So, and these armies are prati, facing each other. So these two armies are facing each other on the battlefield. All these warriors belonging to the two armies facing each other on the battlefield, na bhavishyanti, none of them will survive, none of them will continue to exist. Vratepi tvam, thank goodness. Except for you. Arjuna, Vrite, with the exception of Tvam, you, except for you, none of them. Of course, not only Arjuna will survive, his brothers will survive, and others will survive. But here, Sri Krishna makes a point. You can imagine Arjuna starting to think that we're all going to die here on the battlefield. Sri Krishna assures him, Rate pitvam, except for you, most of these great warriors will perish on this battlefield as their karmas get exhausted. Then, tasmat tvamuttishta yasholabhasva. Tasmat tvamuttishta yasholabhasva jitva shatrum bhungshva rajyam samriddham. Jitva shatrum bhungshva rajyam samriddham. Mayaivaite nihita purvameva. Mayaivaite nihita purvameva. Nimitra matram bhava savyasachan. Nimitra matram bhava savyasachan. Tasmat, therefore Arjuna, tvam uttishta, get up. Remember, Arjuna has fallen to the seat of his chariot. He was back in chapter 1. He was so overwhelmed by dizziness, his emotional meltdown, his panic attack. He fell to the seat of his chariot way back in chapter 1, and he hasn't managed to get up yet. So after 10, 11 chapters, Sri Krishna is still trying to get him up. Tvamuttishta, get up, Arjuna. Yashas labhasva, and gain glory. How? By fighting. Jitva shatrun, having conquered your enemies. Bhungshva, you will enjoy rajyam, the entire kingdom, samriddham, with all of its wealth. What is Sri Krishna saying here? He is saying that they're all going to die, so what are you worried about, Arjuna? Remember, his emotional paralysis that came at the beginning of the chapter came not because of fear, and many people will make that wrong assumption. Arjuna knew no fear. Arjuna was fearless. He was emotionally paralyzed not out of fear for himself, but we could say fear for his own family members on the battlefield. And now the message is coming from Sri Krishna that their death, the death of Arjuna's family members on the battlefield, is, in American English we call it a done deal. It's an already established fact. They're going to die, Arjuna. And since they're going to die regardless of what you do and regardless of what you don't do, therefore, Arjuna, you might as well get up and fight. This is Sri Krishna's argument to Arjuna. Arjuna, you should get up because you're grieving over deaths that are absolutely unavoidable, inevitable. So, and further, your reluctance to fight only causes problems. We talked about back in chapter 1. So therefore, Arjuna, get up. Yashas labhasva, and gain glory. Jitva shatrum, having destroyed your enemies, you will bhungshva, you will enjoy rajyam samriddham, the entire kingdom with its wealth. And Sri Krishna makes it very clear, maya eva ete, to break all these words apart. Maya eva ete, ete, these warriors gathered on the battlefield, they are nihataha, they are killed, maya eva, by me. They have already been killed by me. Of course, they're still standing there. The idea is they will be killed by me. Now, what did I say before? It's not that Sri Krishna decides, I'm going to kill this one and that one and the other one, but they will be killed by Sri Krishna as Kala, as time, as the power. Sri Krishna manifest as the laws of karma will bring about the deaths of all of those warriors gathered on the battlefield. So they are purvam eva, they are already nihitaha, killed. They're already dead. In fact, nice expression in, again, American English, as good as dead. They're as good as dead. They've been killed maya, due to me. Due to me, they're all as good as dead. Therefore, Arjuna, nimitta matram bhava. You should be a nimitta matram. You merely be an instrument. Arjuna is merely an instrument in the hands of time, bringing about the inevitable unfoldment of karma on that battlefield. Nimitra matram. You are merely an instrument, Arjuna. Therefore, he's going to say in the next line, don't hesitate, move forward and fight. Nimitra matram bhava, O Arjuna, you are not remember his emotional meltdown was because he didn't want to be the instrument of the deaths of his own family members. He didn't want to kill them. And what Sri Krishna says is, you're not going to kill them. You are merely a cog in the machine, so to speak. You're merely one little part of this whole scene that's unfolding on the battlefield. So accept the inevitability of their deaths, O Arjuna. Get up and fight. Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna as Savyasachin. It's an unusual expression I just mentioned briefly. Savya, left, Sachi, side. Left side? Oh, left side one. It's a reference to the fact that Arjuna is so highly skilled, he can shoot arrows and wield a bow with his left hand as well as he can with his right hand. Such a person we call ambidextrous. So Savyasachin is a reference to Arjuna being ambidextrous. Sri Krishna concludes, Dronam cha bhishmam cha jayadratham cha Dronam cha bhishmam cha jayadratham cha Karnam tathanyan api yodha viran Karnam tathanyan api yodha viran Maya hatans tvam jahi mavyatishta Maya hatans tvam jahi mavyatishta Yudhyasva jeta sirane sapatnan Yudhyasva jeta sirane sapatnan. Starting the third line. Maya hatan. He's repeating what he's already said. Maya, by me, hatan. They are killed. They are already killed by me. Who is already killed by me? Go back to the beginning. Dronam, Arjuna's teacher. Bhishmam. These are people Arjuna loves so much. Not all of them, Jayadratha and Karna, but definitely Drona and Bhishma are the two people on a battlefield that Arjuna loves most. Bhishma, his great uncle, like a grandfather figure. So, but Sri Krishna says, I've already killed them, along with Jayadratha, along with Karna, the mightiest of warriors on that battlefield, Tata Anyani, as well as other Yodha Viran, other great warriors. Anyan api, Anyan Yodhaviran, as well as other great warriors on that battlefield. Sri Krishna says, Maya Hatan, I've already killed them. So you need not hesitate. In fact, Tvam Jahi, Tum Maro. Exactly that meaning. Kill them! Ma Vyatishta, don't wait. Don't hesitate. Because remember, they're still in the chariot. After this long conversation, Arjuna continues to be seated in the chariot. Sri Krishna has not yet been successful in getting Arjuna to get up and enter into fight. So don't hesitate. Yudhyasva. Engage in this battle, knowing that Jetasi, you will conquer Sapatnan, your enemy, Rane, in battle. You will be victorious. You will win. What is the point of hesitating? Knowing that they're already good as dead, to use the American expression. Your enemies are already as good as dead. Sri Krishna said twice, I've already killed them. Therefore, Arjuna, you merely take your role as an instrument, as a cog in the cosmic machine, the machine of dharma, the karma, the unfoldment of the laws of karma. Go ahead and fight. Now, the scene shifts very dramatically from the battlefield back to the palace, where Sanjaya is narrating all of this to the blind king, Dhritarashtra. Sanjayo vacha, etat shrutva vachanam keshavasya, etat shrutva vachanam keshavasya, kritanjalirvepamana kiriti, kritanjalirvepamana kiriti, namaskritva bhuyahevaha krishnam, namaskritva bhuyahevaha krishnam, sagadgaram bhita pranamya, sagadgaram bhita pranamya. Sanjaya, as you know, also has Divya Drishti and has been narrating all the scenes on the far-off battlefield to the blind king, Dhritarashtra. And Sanjaya's narration continues. Etat shrutva, after Arjuna heard all of this, etat vachanam, this statement, Keshavasya of Sri Krishna, after Arjuna heard what Sri Krishna had to say, Arjuna, who was Kritanjalihi, his hands were folded. Arjuna, who was Vepamanaha, he was trembling. And Arjuna here is described as Kiriti, he's wearing his crown, kind of an odd adjective there. Anyway, Arjuna is described in this way. Then what did Arjuna do? Namaskritva bhuyaha. He folded his hands once again and bowed again to Sri Krishna, Eva indeed, and Aha Krishna. And he began to speak to Sri Krishna. But as he was speaking, pranamya, at the last line, pranamya, having bowed down, Arjuna, who was bhitaha, overcome by fear, trembling, hands folded, and how will Arjuna speak? Sagadgaram. Sagadgaram, his haltingly, his a catch in your throat. So Arjuna spoke very hesitantly to Sri Krishna. And what did Arjuna say? Arjuna uvacha, sthane hrishikesha tava prakirtya, sthane hrishikesha tava prakirtya, jagat prahrishyat yanurajyate cha, jagat prahrishyat yanurajyate cha rakshansi bhitani dishodravanti rakshas Vyani dishodravanti sarve namasyanti cha siddha sanghaha yanti ta sanghaha Hrishikesha, O great Krishna, sthane, in its place. Tava prakriti, and I'm going to come back to that. Sthane. Everything is literally in its place. Everything is as it should be. Everything is as it's meant to be. And he continues, and we'll come back to that. He says, it is right, sthane, it is only right that tava prakirtya, that by your glory, prakirti, by your glory, jagat prahrishyati, the entire world prahrishyati is excited, anurajyate cha, and is gladdened, is delighted. That's nice. It is only right, sthane, that the entire world should be excited and delighted by your glory revealed in this cosmic form. I'll come back to that word sthane in just a minute. We'll finish this verse. And Arjuna continues to describe what he sees. Arjuna observes that Rakshansi, the demons, Rakshasas, who are bhitani, who are frightened, dishaha dravanti, they're running in all other directions, being frightened by Sri Krishna's glorious revelation. And sarve, all of the siddha sanghaha, all of the groups of enlightened ones, all the great ones surrounding you, namasyanti cha, they are all bowing to you. There's a reference to when Arjuna first started. He was just before he focused on the warriors being drawn into the Lord's blazing mouths. Prior to that, he had narrated different groups of deities who were gathered around Sri Krishna. So amongst the deities gathered around Sri Krishna, all of the great ones are bowing to Sri Krishna, and all of the demons are running away. Now, that word sthane used to seem very inconspicuous to me whenever I studied the Bhagavad Gita, until my guru seized on that word and made a brilliant insight, and an insight I've never heard anywhere else. Let me share that insight with you. This idea that Arjuna recognizes sthane. Sthana is place. Sthane, in place. Whatever Arjuna is witnessing, the deaths of his family members. And Arjuna can say, sthane. It is as it must be. It is right. It is inevitable. It is according to Ishvara's order. And this is my Guru's teaching. And that is, when death comes to a friend, a family members, or to ourselves, there is often resistance to that. No one wants to not. Can't say no one wants to die, because some people do want to die, especially if they're suffering a lot. They do want to die, but generally, no one wants to die. Death gets resisted, and that resistance causes more suffering. If you're going to die and you resist death, you make your death more miserable. Or if you're losing a loved one And if you're incapable of accepting their pending death, you make your suffering worse. And sadly, you may make your family member may suffer more. Be honest. When your dying family member sees you crying, does that make them feel better? It's not like you're demonstrating how much you love them. You're demonstrating emotional pain, and your dying family member feels responsible for causing you this emotional pain. How is that helping them? So Pujya Swamiji's point here was, and sorry to use some strong language here, and we'll finish up the class with this observation, we should grow up and accept the inevitability of death. That's what this section of the Gita is about. These warriors are karmically destined to die on the battlefield, just like your family members are karmically destined to die, just like you and I are karmically destined to die. None of us have any idea, but we do know that when our karmas are exhausted, we will die. We understand it, everyone can understand that conceptually. But in the hospital room or at the bedside, that intellectual appreciation sometimes gets overwhelmed by sadness and grief. And it leads to this resistance. You are resisting that which is inevitable. Who will win, you or death? Pretty obvious. So your resistance to death is not only futile, but causes more suffering for you and for the one who's dying. Arjuna here says, sthane. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it must be. There's nothing wrong here. There's nothing to be resisted. There's nothing fundamentally unacceptable. This is all Ishvara's order. That was my Guru's favorite expression and he encouraged all of us again and again to understand the unfoldment of karma as being part of Ishvara's order. And that understanding can allow us to respond to situations more gracefully. If you can also say, sthane, okay, it is as it must be. It doesn't mean it's something you like. No one wants loved ones to die. It's not pleasant, it's not desirable, but it is inevitable. And it's not wrong in any sense of the word. It is completely consistent with the laws of the cosmos which are Ishvara's laws. So it is according to the law of karma, death takes place. That law of karma is part of Ishvara's intelligence, Ishvara's order. And with that understanding, just as Arjuna can say, sthane, everything is okay. That's a simple way of putting it. Everything is okay. Sab theek hai. That sense. Everything is okay. Sthane, when you understand thoroughly Ishvara's order, then you can easily say that. Sab theek hai, everything is okay. And as Arjuna said, sthane Hrishikesha, O Lord, everything is as it must be. Very nice when Pujya Swamiji seized on that word. Normally we just gloss over it. It doesn't seem so significant. But he brought this out so brilliantly, and I'm happy to share that with you. We'll continue this text in our next class. A quick announcement here. At the end of the last class, I announced that we want to resume our celebrations. So we have Krishna Janmashtami, Ganesh Chaturthi, other celebrations are coming up, and we need to gather some volunteers together into a committee to do that. The committee will be, as a committee, collectively, the committee will be responsible for the arrangements, getting the hall ready, getting the altar ready, getting any food or prasad ready. And I want to thank those of you who have already volunteered to be a part of the committee. Vasanti is going to be organizing that committee, and it'll be formed, and she'll be sending out an email shortly to convene the committee and to start working on the celebrations. If you still want to be a part of that committee, you can still send her an email, Vasanti, Vasanthi, she spells it, at arshabodha.org. Send her an email, and that committee will be formed this week, and we'll start then to get ready for upcoming celebrations. We might not be ready in time for Krishna Janmashtami, but I think we can be ready for Ganesh Chaturthi, and then we'll continue all of our celebrations. So please volunteer, and I think you'll enjoy it, and it'll be a great help. We can all enjoy the celebrations. Okay, we'll conclude with our brief prayers. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kaving Gavinam Hupamashravastumam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shranvan Utabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Duhka Bhag Bhavit Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Mahamritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.